Hello, everyone. Um, it's so lovely to have you here with us today for this live stream Hall Rounds conversation that is called The First Spark of Collective Leadership. I am Miranda Gonzalez, or Miranda Gonzalez, she, her, hers. I am currently on the land of the Tongva, originally from the land of the Potawatomi, the Three Council of Three Fires, Ojibwe, and Ottawa Nations. I have curly hair and glasses, and I am of dark skin tone. And I will pass it on to Devin to introduce themselves.
Hey y'all, I'm Devin Berkshire. My pronouns are she, her. I'm here from the land of the Munsee Lenape, or colonially known as Greenwood Lake, New York. And just for a visual description, I am a white woman with short blondish hair and a gray and white striped blouse. And that's me. Back to you, Miranda.
Lovely. So we were fortunate enough to curate the series, The Evolution of Shared Leadership, which has led us into this live stream conversation. Please find The Evolution of Shared Leadership and all of the contributing essays on thehowlround.com. I believe I'm correct about that. Link so we can share them all. Today, Here Theater has dropped that essay. Yesterday was the movement, and the day before that was the perspective from a consultant, from Alex Meda, who is one of the co-founders of Culture Change Lab. So with that, I want to hand it over to our panelists to introduce themselves. And I would love for Lauren to begin, then we can move over to Leilani and then Jose Luis.
Hello, everyone. I am Lauren Turner Hines. My pronouns are she and her, and I am joining you all today from Bubancha, the land of the Homa, the Choctaw, the Chitimacha, Opelousas people, now known more commonly as New Orleans, Louisiana. And I am the founding producing artistic director for a Black theater company here in New Orleans called No Dream Deferred. And I'm also the founding envisionist and executive director for the new Andre Caillou Center for Performing Arts and Cultural Justice, also here in New Orleans on the historic Bayou Road. It's such a pleasure and honor to join this panel and to be with you all. And I'm going to pass it over to Leilani.
Aloha, hafade. My name is Leilani Chan. I have long brown hair with white streaks, and I'm wearing shell jewelry and a green and pink manuheali'i shirt, and some shell earrings from the Marshall Islands. And I am mixed race, Asian, Pacific. And I go by she, her. My company is called Theater Productions. And right now I am in the land of the Tongva, also known as Los Angeles. And I am rooted in Hawaii, which is also the land of the Kanaka Maoli. Aloha. And I'll pass it to Jose.
I forgot to do my visual description. I'm just do it real quick. I'm a Black woman, y'all. I got curly hair. I'm dark skinned. Okay, Jose Luis.
Hi, my name is Jose Luis Valenzuela, and my pronouns are he, him, él. I'm Mexican. I look really young. I have very little hair and white hair, whereas they're left. I have a mustache and a beard that is white. I have dark glasses. I have dark skin. I'm wearing a blue suit with a flower shirt with blue and red and blue with a blue tie. Really cool. It looks great. So I am a distinguished emeritus professor from UCLA and the artistic director of the Latino Theater Company, the co-director of the NLTI. And, I am in the land of the Thonga, and we are here to have this amazing discussion about collective leadership. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be with all of you.
Thank you also very much for saying yes and to wanting to participate in this conversation. We're going to delve into some just really basic questions, which the very first one is, everyone has pretty much emerged from a deep cultural movement of the needs of the community, right? Myself included, as a producing artist at Urban Theater Company. And we are wanting to know if you can share a little bit about your theater's founding or the founding that has shaped your personal leadership approach. And whoever wants to take that first can.
I'll go. And since I'm the youngest one in the group, uh, really, I come from Chicano theater, which was a movement in the 60s and the 70s. And I actually work before I moved to Los Angeles in a collective creation company. It's called El Teatro de la Esperanza. I was with another company. We had a director in El Teatro de la Gente. But when I moved to El Teatro de la Esperanza, we were total collective. We was an ensemble, and we never had a director, or we made all the decisions collectively. And we learned really this from Colombia, from el TEC, Teatro Experimental de Cali. Enrique Buenaventura and Santiago Garcia and these great people from Latin America. In Cuba, they were working a lot on this idea of the collective process and the collective creation, which is a way of creating and a way to organize ourselves as theater companies, where we can all have leadership, but everybody can, to have the same amount of leadership and with the skills and careful things. But that's really how I learned to be. That's my beginning and my future and my present. It's been like that my entire life. Leilani?
I was hoping Lauren would go next, but that's okay. I got called. That's all right. This is collective. When I started the company, it was a couple of decades ago. I started off. What do I want to say? Like I founded the company, but I was already. We called it collective theater back then. Thank you for using that word. But nowadays it's devised theater, right? But also when it comes to the administration of the organization, it's gone through various phases where folks have joined. I thought we were starting a collective, but so many people don't want to do the administrative work, so folks have fallen off. And so I've been the steady person, but I also never have thought of myself as, I never wanted an organization that was hierarchical. I want people to be able to participate in decision making and participate in the creative process. That said, the organization has to stay alive. And I guess my feeling is that with theaters of color, small theaters of color, we have had to work collectively to keep an organization going out of necessity. There's no way I could have, especially in the early years of this organization, done it by myself. And I would say in the early days, I don't think my partner, Ova Salpeng, thought of himself as one of the artistic directors. It was sort of my thing, and he was coming along for the ride. But along the way, he just started doing more and more work and started accepting that, yes, you're part of the collective. So I think there's a long history of couples starting nonprofits, especially within theaters of color, out of necessity. Because as an artist, you're married to the company, and that's like your child as well. So for us, the two of us have been the constant, with a lot of folks coming in and rotating in and out. And I think where we're at right now is the first time we've had a staff. And when we hired them, I was like, I don't want to call us a staff. We're a squad. Because I think in the past, what I've felt is that everybody's expecting this hierarchical employee boss relationship. And as a small nonprofit, I can't operate like that. We all wear so many different hats. There's so few times we can say, like, you can't say that's not my job. Like, we're in theater. Like, if something's not being done, someone's got to do it. And so really trying to nurture that responsibility in the organization, so that it's like we're not one person's taking everything on, but everybody is chipping in. And I'm really learning a lot from my younger staff members, because they're coming in with a whole new set of languages and expectations, and I'm needing to be a bit more flexible on how we do these things, at the same time manage the experience that we have with the mentoring and teaching, but also making sure that it's a shared responsibility to the livelihood of the organization. I'll stop there. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yeah, so I mean, I think too, I come from the Black theater tradition and legacy and lineage of what it means. And so, when we first started talking about this concept of shared leadership and collective leadership, it hasn't always looked like what I think people think of when they think of shared leadership and collective leadership today, but it's definitely that. It's just that it's in service of and works in sharing leadership across generations, right? And so I've always been someone who has been open to hearing from and being guided by elders. And so when we started No Dream Deferred, which of course that right there should tell you everything in the naming of it, is that we're talking about a look in the past as how it'll move us forward. My steering committee was full of active Black theater elders who were so happy that they had captured a young person who would listen to everything they say and do everything they say exactly in that way. And I was willing to do the legwork, right? I was willing to go out there and do the things that will continue in the legacy of Black theater and continue to grow Black theater. And so that has continued. There's been times when I've been able to rally my colleagues and contemporaries in service of this collective movement forward. How do we move forward as a collective? And what is it that we need as an artistic community? And also it's always connected to our needs as a cultural community. But, a lot of times it's me in conversation with elders and in shared leadership with elders. And it's me in conversation with sometimes ancestors and in shared leadership with ancestors. And I think what that is, and, to Leilani's point in terms of like how things change and this being inherent to how we work out of a need of survival, and why I don't trust that predominantly white institutions really understand it as a framework and approach, is because there are certain foundational aspects of shared and collective leadership that have to kind of be accomplished first before you really get to enter into what it is and what the benefits are. And I would say that the first thing is you have to be really good at naming the lineage and legacy that you come out of publicly. You know what I mean? And so if you are not showing up in space and saying, I am this and I'm doing this, and it's connected to this, and it's connected to the Free Southern Theater, and it's connected to Ethiopian Theater and Dashiki Theater Project, and this is the lineage that I'm in, and you're not used to doing that, which is a form of shared leadership, right? Because when you see me, you're seeing the framework of Ella Baker and decentralized leadership. So you are, receiving the blessing of leadership from me and Ella Baker, right? And so you're welcome. But you know what I mean? But like, if that's not already a part of your cultural practice or how you move, then I'm not so sure if you are going to understand the other concepts that are connected to what it means to be in shared or collective leadership. And I definitely know that you're not going to be able to benefit from them. So that's how No Dream Deferred was founded, with this kind of understanding that we were paying homage to those who have come before, and we were continuing this vision, this collective vision. And then the Andre Caillou Center for Performing Arts and Cultural Justice literally is in honor of an ancestor that has been underappreciated, but also is continuing this connection between confronting this concept of space inequity, specifically in New Orleans, and for Black artists, performing artists, and it's confronting that. And so it's continuing. The work is building. The work is continuing, and we're listening, and we're open to listening from elders and to ancestors as we continue forward in this work.
I thank you for sharing all of that, everybody. And you all have my wheels turning in very different ways. And I just want to elevate and amplify some words that you all said, which is collective theater, right? Jose Luis mentioned collective theater. Jose Luis mentioned, which is basically an ensemble. We talked about co-creation, and we've talked about cultural practice. And I really appreciate the fact, Lauren, that you brought up that there are institutions that have not had this be a part of their legacy or their history. So then therefore are considered new to this way of thinking, this way of gathering inputs, as well as all the harmful stuff that goes in the beginning of that, right? Like, I think that's what we're saying, but not saying. And so I just wanted to amplify that very, very much so, because the reality of it is that there are evolving words that occur within our own industry. Mm-hmm. And between all of us here, we have different decades and different perspectives within those decades of a long history of work. And going from collective theater to going to devised work, to going to what co-creation looks like, to going to, right? There's this long history of that. And I think, Lauren, what you also are highlighting for me is that there is a way, and Leilani said it as well, there is something about the younger generations coming in and going, right, really, really wonderfully throwing themselves into this work, and sometimes not asking questions about what came before. So I think it's important to name that, because I'm learning that in my own practice, where I'm going, oh, wow, these ideas have already existed in different iterations. So the fact that I am thinking at my age right now that this is innovative, it actually isn't. It's just the way we've been culturally practicing it for years. Jose Luis, I think you wanted to say something, so I'm going to pass it over to you.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's great to listen to both of you, to the three of you. And, I just want to say that we created our company, the Latino Theater Company, 40 years ago. We're celebrating our 40th birthday, and it's a totally collective group. We should sometimes, it's well, like Enrique Buenaventura told us when we were very young. What you lost in power, what you lose in power, you gain in creativity when you are a collective group. And it's so truthful, and it's not easy. It's not easy at all. It's complicated. We have, meaning we started with 25 members, and then we went to, I think, 12. Some of them passed away, and we are 5 right now. But we are 5 members who began 40 years ago. And we are together, which to me, that is beautiful. It's longer than very marriages in a way. So, but we are an ensemble, we're a collective, we are meaning we started like any other theater company, just as a lab, figuring it out what we're creating. And then little by little, now we are, we run a big theater in Los Angeles called Los Angeles Theater Center. And, we have a board of directors, and we have staff, meaning we hire around 300 people a year. And, but our collective mind makes the decisions about, like, being yesterday, we met about, okay, this is the director that I'm thinking for this play. What do you guys think? Let's talk about the person. Let's talk about the director. Let's talk about the issues. These are the problems with the play. Okay, this is the play. This is the issues. You're going to focus on this, and you're going to focus on that. I'm going to, it's that type of collective impact and influence that we have on each other, even though for reasons of I'm the artistic director, they're all associate artists in the organization. We only have one board member in the board, which is a mistake. I used to have all the members used to be on the board. It's a long history, but we have to be careful because boards can destroy your collective group. So we have to understand because these other structures who are around are not for us, and people are hard to understand, and we have to fight them in order to survive and exist. Meaning we really talk, to everything, we criticize each other. I think this action that you took was not a good action. You have to understand the times and where we are. I mean, it gets really personal sometimes, but it's okay. We have to understand that we are a collective company, an ensemble that we have to appreciate and accept the way we're all very different, and we have to appreciate that. So that's really kind of fantastic. And we just finished writing a first draft of a play collectively, which means everybody in the group writes, which is like crazy. Especially like Evelina, I remember my wife, she's a playwright. She goes, oh, I can write this play in a way. Why do we, but it's the idea of creating together for the purpose of what the thing is. And the best part of it is we are in a succession plan, which means we have 22 members, young members, that we're beginning to train for the next 3 years. It started already 2 years ago to take over the leadership and the organization. And this is really, really important for us because in the research we've done, people of color, when the founders pass or whatever, the organizations fall apart. We don't want that to happen. It's more important the work in the community than ourselves. So we have to empower the new generation. And it's phenomenal how many skills they have. I mean, it's totally different than when we started. We didn't have any skills, like we didn't know anything about anything. We just wanted to do theater. These people like done a lot of things, and they went to grad school. And, it's a whole other world, which is fascinating, but it's fantastic. And I think this is part of continue. And, I have a thing about the device and the collective, and you guys can please tell me if I'm totally wrong. Because the collective process had a definite purpose about relationship, humanity, and idea what we're talking to the community about. Okay? Device work is an idea, style, and form. It doesn't have to have a purpose. It's why I separate it, and we do collective work. We don't do device work, because
That's a whole word right there. That'll preach, Jose Luis. That'll preach.
Yeah,
That is it.
You know what I mean?
Yes. I've
So-
never been able to articulate it, but that's exactly the difference. Thank you for that. Didn't mean to interrupt, but thank you.
Yeah, no. So, we in the community understand that. We know, and I don't want to change that. I may be old, but I want to, meaning the idea of collective, the word itself creates a unity, creates community, creates understanding. The way device even sounds divisive.
That's exactly right.
You know what I mean? It's just the sound. My ideas may be better than you. Collectively doesn't have that. It's yes, our ideas are gonna work together. It's a whole thing, you know.
And I think it speaks to the values too, that's kind of what I was saying before around not, some of these predominantly white spaces not being able to really fully reap the benefits of shared leadership or collective leadership because they don't have the same originating values. And, you want to try to replicate, but you don't necessarily have the foundation to be able to reap the full benefits of it. And I think that even goes to this conversation around what is your real intention behind devising versus the intention around collectivism, right? Collective work, collective purposing, collective movement has a different purpose than devising. And a lot of times, you know, the slippery slope. I just had this conversation with some collaborators actually for a project we just finished, which was Wonder Wander City Park, Miranda, that you saw, about the slippery slope of devising, which is that you have a core group of people who then end up being the sole decision makers and also the sole people who are being credited for this work, this body of work that so many people have contributed to. And so how that always is like, how do you balance it? And it's when you insert the trappings or the look, the aesthetic of collective work and try to insert it into an American theater making process that it gets changed. You know, it's like collective work. We all know you might have to be on some CP time when it comes to how we work together with each other.
Yeah.
You know, so how do you insert that into the urgency that's built into American theater making? How do you understand all of the nuance of working with each other? Because we know, you know, I know I don't usually say stuff like this on a live, but we know we get on each other's nerves. We got things that we can talk about with each other in our groups that can't be shared with the larger group. But how do you then apply that to this other process that's not built with any of those values in mind? And so it changes. So I think that in some ways, I definitely agree that there's a difference, right, between what it means to devise and what it means to work collectively. But I think that it's important that it has a different name because it's really a different thing.
Totally.
It's really a different thing. And you get a different result.
That's right.
Every time. So this is, yeah, that's spot on.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay, I'm going to start using collective now. We're going backwards. Go back to collective.
Yeah, because
also,
go ahead, Leilani.
Oh no, I think what it brings up for me is like decolonizing the process as well. There's a difference between just devising and decolonizing. I think with our work, so much is done. Like I definitely agree with whoever's in the room or the people who are meant to be in the room. But if you didn't do the work before the room, then you didn't do your job. And I think that's the part in American theater that doesn't get recognized or valued, and that we who work really with community don't get valued for the amount of months and years that we're in a community before we even set up that room. So, you know, right now we've been doing a lot of work with the Micronesian community. What theater out there would know how to set up, you know, we'll do a Micronesian theater, we'll do a Micronesian play, and then why didn't any Micronesians show up? You know, well, the protocol with a Pacific Islander community is very different. And it's kind of more along the lines of what you're talking about, Lauren. You have to talk to the elders, you have to do the protocol, you have to talk to the leaders. I didn't have anybody show up at our workshops that wasn't told by my collaborator, Innocenta Sound Kiku, to show up. None of the young people would have shown up if it wasn't for it. Auntie Eno said I had to show up. And they showed up, and then they were poets before or musicians before, and suddenly now they're actors. So it's a process that I have to keep learning how to articulate in our grants or in our contracts, that this time is what you're actually paying for, not just the week we show up for the show.
That's right.
We've been talking to your community in your state for years now, developing that trust. And it's very hard to get the equality, the value of it in dollars, right? But I still need to pay people. We still are in this inflation right now, or this high cost of living as everybody else. So that's always been the struggle for me, is there's these corporate models, and nonprofit is kind of within that corporate model. And so how do we kind of go between, like, it's not working for us, but that's what we have to identify what it is in order to get the funding. At the same time, they recognize the word devise, so I'm going to use it, but I don't think it's exactly the right fit. And so it's always a struggle to kind of figure out, how do we articulate what we're doing? and learning how to put words behind that.
Yeah, I think it's important that we understand that, at least in our experience, when we created many shows collectively for years. Like we had a way of we do research for a year or 2 years, and then we created a scene, hypothesis for the play. Had a whole structure. But if you say, okay, you're gonna write this scene and you're gonna direct the same scene, but if that doesn't work, I can take it away from you and give it to somebody else to rewrite it without this idea of, oh, you can't touch my scene. I wrote that line. You know what I mean? This was my story. It's not the point. The point is the work that we're doing for the community, the story that we're telling from the community, the story that they told us, and that we have to honor. You know what I mean? And the way we're putting it up. So it's what I love about the collective idea, that it is the creation of something from the community to the community with a community. Even if it's 5 actors and 2 writers, whatever, that's a community that's responding to the community. And it's pretty special, I think. I love it. I mean, it takes longer. It takes longer. It takes, like you say, Lauren, sometimes we have to get very personal. And but that's we're humans. And we have to be personal.
I just got back from Ghana and I learned something about CP time, which is color people's time, if I don't know. But I learned something about it as it relates to like the continent. Because I was like, one of my discoveries was like, oh, everybody's on CP time. CP time is normal time. I love it here. But one of the things I realized was that they were saying that because the continent is so abundant, right? Anything you want, you have. Anything you like, from fruit, it's always in bloom, it's eternal spring. So there's no need for this urgent or rush. Like there's not this idea that like you have a certain amount of time to get or something that you need and you could miss it. Right. And so I think about that when I think about collective work and embracing it as I think time as a construct breaks down because we realize the abundance that we have in collectiveness, right? That we have everything we need right here. So we can start to decentralize urgency and all kinds of other things that have kept us bound when we work together, which is why it works for us. Right, is because we have more when we are together, when we are working collectively. So it's freeing in a lot of ways.
And I want to add on just a little bit to that, because I think what's important that all 3 of you are talking about too is what is being centered. And what is being centered is relational. And there is no time or price or hierarchical structure that will lean into that. It just won't. So there's a discord, right, in the body when that happens. And then it does not allow you to create. It's a block. And I think what is in cultural practice for all of us is making sure that the art is what leads and that it doesn't necessarily resemble process first. But I do want to ask a quick question, and I know Devin has one too, but I want to make sure really quickly while we're here, is that how does this idea of collective creation show up in your processes, not just with the art, but administratively? Does it? Does it show up administratively? And if so, what does that look like?
In many different ways. People have a lot of talents that you can utilize. Like, for example, in our company, Evelina, who's a playwright, she can look at all the grants and correct all the language and understand all what the message is from the company that needs to be in that grant. You know what I mean? So everybody has an administrative, totally administrative. I have an actor who is, meaning a guy who likes to be building things, who he takes care of the building. everything that happens in the building. He's aware that we need to do, and we have a technical, we have everything, but as part of the company and this collective, as part of what he does administratively, the security, the tagging, everything that has to do, has to be taken care of. And we have somebody who has great relationships, and all this is work. It's about those relationships, bringing them into the table for fundraisers, for money, for question. You know what I mean? For opening. Everybody plays an administrative role. And the best thing, right now, we lost our managing director, let's say, who was an employee. And I get it. An employee is an employee. They get more money somewhere else. They're going to go over there. But even our administrators or staff understand the collective process to the point of say, okay, we don't have this person right now. We're going to divide the work into all of us. You're going to focus on this, you're going to focus on that, and we're going to, in the meantime, until we get the new person to come and begin putting all together again. It's important in the administrative part of our organization that everybody does 2 or 3 jobs, like you were talking about, Lilani, because it's what's needed. It's hard. It's hard because the HR laws, the minimum pay. Man, it's hard. I mean, I talk to our payroll people and say, but how is it possible, that we cannot, it's very complicated. Try to live in this system with all the laws that are upon us and trying to do this collective idea. But we have to continue because they appreciate it. Meaning people work in my company for 11 years, 12 years, and they don't make a lot of money, believe me. I mean, we are a small company, but because they feel ownership, it's their company, They can make it succeed or fail because of their work, So we have to, I don't, they don't work for me or for us. We work together. They're not my employees, they're my coworkers. Those 300 people. You know what I mean? They're my coworkers. We work together. At least,
Yeah, and I would say that, to be fully transparent, I'm in a moment right now where, I operate and work in service of memory, right? Like I remember what collective work feels like. And so I'm always trying to recreate that that. And I'm finding that, there was a time when I looked up and I was really working in alignment with, like I said earlier, a lot of my elders, and they're transitioning, right? A lot of them have transitioned. Most of them that were influential in the founding of the things that we're doing right now, they've transitioned. And so I'm in the process of finding others, contemporaries who remember. And I'm believing that they're there, you know what I mean? But it's just taking me some time to connect so that people do remember that we are working in service of a memory, of a ideal, of a us that can exist again, and not this idea that you're working for me. And also, like, what is the healing that we have to do where it says, like, I ain't gonna work if it's gonna, you know what I mean? Like, even this idea that, like, I don't want to work in service of someone else's vision or dream is also representative, I think, of a disconnect. I mean, I get it, but it's like, what's so bad about that, about someone, you know what I mean? Not that that's what this is, but like, there's also something there about this individualistic understanding that, like, I can't thrive if I work in service of someone else thriving, or that it has to be an either or, this binary. So right now I'm in the process of seeking out others who will work in a collective way towards a shared vision for community, because that's always been the goal, and that's how I've worked my entire life. Yeah, I'm seeking out who those folks are. But administratively, I was thinking, you know, I know you're not talking about process, but even when Leilani was talking earlier about the work that happens before we get in the room, a collective sensibility has a part of the process built in that even when you get in the room, your first question is, who ain't here?
Mhm.
Mainly because we know we always late. But we do say, we stop for a moment and we say, okay, is everybody here? Who ain't here, right? And we have a part of our process that is the indulgent check-in, right? Like we're gonna take an hour checking on how you're doing because we understand that this room doesn't operate in isolation.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing for our organizations and institutions. The people who are coming in to be in service to this vision have so much going on outside that impacts how they show up in this space. And I think that our process and our administrative ways, our practices acknowledge that, you know what I mean? And make room and space for that in a way that other spaces don't. But yeah, right now it's like, you know, really, I think we're going to come around to it. I think we're going to come back around to this idea. You know, when I think, like I said, when I think of my artistic lineage and I think of Free Southern Theater,
Mhm.
where they were touring throughout the American South, putting on plays in Mississippi for
Mhm.
folks who may not be able to read to learn how to register to vote
Yeah.
in their 20s. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, that was a collective movement.
Mhm.
That was them in service of something bigger than themselves. And I feel like that is really the work. That's always been the work. We've never done art for art's sake.
Mhm. Mhm.
In fact, I don't even want, that's boring to me.
Mhm.
It's not
Yeah.
even good art. It's not even good art. So like I want like I'm desperately seeking out the people who dare to remember what it was and then use that as the catalyst for realizing now in this moment there's no better time than now. There's no better time. This is the perfect time. And I'm so glad that, you know, as generations have gone on in art making, that they are so talented, like you're saying, Jose Luis, like that these people have graduate degrees and they're also because like let's show off right now. Like
Mhm.
I want to big up all of the younger folks, the folks my age. Like, come on, let's like show them. You
Mhm.
know, I have a colleague of mine who said something recently that it was so, it just split my head open. And she said, I am ready, or when are we going to begin to celebrate the impending segregation?
Hmm. Wow.
And I said, wait a minute now. And I said, there is something to celebrate that is us that I think we're not considering in this moment. You know what I'm saying? Not so much that segregation of itself is something to celebrate, but to celebrate our spaces and the things that make us us and to understand them in context and historical context. And I think that's beginning to happen across the globe. And this conversation is such a huge piece of that. Like,
Mhm.
how much of this, whatever they're calling shared or devised, is us anyway?
Mhm.
And you know, we internalize it as what we have to do to make it, right? But
Mhm.
actually it is a brilliant technology that we are the only ones who really know how to do it. So
Every time I think I have a thought, you all say something and I'm thinking about something else. So I'm like, I try to center on a thought. I think I'll just talk from my own experience right now. Like I said, we've only had a staff for 2 years now. So that's put me in a new position of like boss and supervisor, which again, I don't feel comfortable with this word. I'm more interested in let's work together. We got to keep the organization alive. We got to work together. We're all responsible for how much is spent and how much is earned, but that's not our priority. At the same time, my new squad members have a lot more experience in corporate America and bring up HR issues and things like that. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I've been on a learning curve of, okay, well, what is our reality for the structures that aren't hierarchical? And I'm going to shout out to my operations and diaspora programs director, Stephanie Soltri-Kamba, who joined us and has brought in some of the technology of marrying more people of color based healing practices with needing to do reviews every 6 months, needing to have a staff retreat. And that has been incredibly valuable to me to learn where, because I've been struggling with the new generation coming in with what I interpret as entitlement. But through this process, learning more about, well, why aren't we asking to be paid and have full-time? Like, it's taken me 20 years to have full-time staff. And the difference between someone who I'm hiring as an independent contractor and someone who's a full-time employee is a different level of commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to name, taking that from the younger generation, name that if the institutional structures would allow us as BIPOC organizations to have full-time salaries equivalent to the cost of living, we could do this work so much holistically. There's just a lot of times where we just lose folks because accessibility to be able to do this work means you have to have another job so that you can do this job, which means it's just really hard to live up to our principles in that way when folks are coming and going based on survival. And I have to name that for myself too, so that I don't take it, oh, they don't like me no more. But it's like, no, I can't, we don't have the capacity to provide the level of salaries that each of us deserve. Anyway, that's another tangent I'm going on. I also wanted to say that certain things, I always bring up the word theater hubris, because there's certain people in our communities and in our field like to drop that heavy word professionalism down all the time. And it's like, well, if we haven't had access to a theater with smart lights ever before when we were going to undergrad or whatever, you can't tell me, my professionalism is because I don't know the up-to-date technology. I'm like, I have not had access. And I have to put that towards my younger generation too, is like, you have not had access to those theaters or those spectacle making type things. But like, for example, I just came back from tour with our current show to Saipan and Guam. The only way we could get to Saipan, because there are no theater spaces there that could take the capacity of a full production. So we, for the first time, did it at an outdoor festival. We never got a tech. We never got dress rehearsal. We had planned a dress rehearsal on the stage with the lights. There were actually lights we could use, but electricity wasn't plugged in yet in the outdoor venue. So like the level of extreme flexibility that we had to have to put this up. And then of course we had the show, we put it up, and it rained, and we did not have cover. It's like in that moment I learned actors are waterproof, but equipment is not. The actors are like, whatever, we don't care, it's hot. So they're like, yay, we're refreshing. It's not great, but they were getting rained on. Meanwhile, my tech folks are like, they didn't have my director role was holding an umbrella over the laptop and the projector. Like, these are things you're not going to be taught at school, but it's part of our professionalism, is not to throw down the word professionalism when things aren't going right. It's professionalism is when you don't have all the resources, can you still make the show go on? That's what I had to learn right away. And finding other people who are willing to work under those conditions are few and far between. So when you find those people who are in it for the cause and for that reason, and are willing to be like, okay, that wasn't ideal, but we had hundreds of people see the show. Mm-hmm. If we had said, nope, we're not going to do it because we don't have a theater, we would not have had a show in Micronesia for Micronesians. Literally, people came to this festival because it's such a big deal on traditional indigenous canoes.
Wow, that's beautiful.
They were sailing in, and then then they did a chant before our performance. So, and there's like this one point where we talk about the legend of how the sail was created in Marshall Islands. And the sail goes up, and because all these sailors had just sailed in through weather, And then talk about island time. Like if Mama Ocean wants to have a storm and Mama Sky are gonna have a fight, the boat's gonna get there late. Like they got there like 2 a.m. instead of what was expected was 6 p.m. But they still got up and did a chant for us. And then when the sail went up, all the sailors in the audience were like, yeah. And we had never got a cheer that loud before for a boat sail going up, you know?
And
So
I would
these
rather
are
that.
the-
Who wants to
the-
be in a stuffy theater compared to what you're describing? That's
Yeah.
amazing. Like,
Yeah,
That is beautiful.
like
That's
our actor,
magical.
yeah, like our actor was like, one of his lines was like, we need to build a shelter because it's gonna rain, and literally it was raining. So he's like, oh, we need to build a shelter. It's raining. These are the things that we have to. These are the blessings and the presents we get when we allow some of that professionalism and theater hubris to like, okay, let it go. We expect the unexpected, and in reverse, we get to perform for the actual community the show's about.
and let it go as a standard, right? Because I feel like we can do all that. That ain't even anything. Like, I can be in a theater and be all whatever. That ain't even like, we can do so much more.
Mhm.
So like
Mhm.
all of that's a part of what we are capable of. So that is the highest standard is ridiculous compared to what it is, what's actually possible and what we're actually capable of.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and these times, I think it's really important to also, I'm old enough to know that this happened to us in the 80s when this began, professionalism and innovation, and you have to be excellent. And it was like a bunch of BS because in the 70s, we were doing theater on the streets and in the parks and everywhere. And then suddenly and it was just gatekeepers for funding, telling us that you're not good enough in order for you to be getting the money that gets funded. And, and right now, it's coming. I went to a meeting not long ago, and I came out like, I'm like in the 80s again, which totally destroyed the NEA in the 1980s when Reagan came in. The California Arts Council went from a $40 million budget in the 70s to $1.5 million. And we had no money in California for the arts. So beware, this is the fight that we have to fight right now with strength and don't give in to those words because we've done it. We have the creativity, we have the skills, we can do magic like in what you're describing. Really, really, really magic, because that's what theater is. It's magical. And the community engage themselves with us because they know we come from the right place. We bring in the history with us. We bring in our ancestors with us. We bring in our community with us to have a dialogue heart to heart with our community, you know. And I think that's the difference. And we have that as communities. So we have to fight this new language that is coming to us like a big wave right now, big wave, and say, that's all. That's enough. Your dry theater, your bad theater that you're doing. We're the ones who have to say that's bad theater. That's dry theater. That theater has no soul. It has nothing. I don't care if you make $500,000 in ticket sales. I go and I'm bored because I have no experience of humanity in your play. And we have to start saying those things.
Not to mention the toxic ways you're making it, which to me is the mark of not being professional.
Yeah.
If you're working in a space that you got people who know all the fancy terms and the lights, but you're being harmed in that space. This is not a professional space. I don't care what you say. You know what I mean? So absolutely, absolutely. It's a reclamation. It's a reclamation that has to happen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump in here.
I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm with Leilani. Like, there's so many threads of this conversation that I want to pull. Like, every time I have a question, one of you kind of answers it in a magical way. So I have like 8 other questions lined up. But I wanted to pick up on something Jose Luis has kind of mentioned once or twice, which you mentioned boards, and then you mentioned funders. And I'm wondering, with these beautiful fluent structures you all are working with, how have you like navigated these you're all nonprofits, right? You still have to kind of navigate these extractive nonprofit structures that, you know, you're just kind of forced to deal with. How do you navigate that and still, you know, hang on to your organizational integrity and values and still navigate that whole nonprofit like mess? That's for all of you, and any of you can feel free to
Well,
start.
It's very complicated. It's
Mhm.
very complicated. I mean, uh, in because we've done it for so long, meaning or at least we have done it for so long. We got through so many phases of how the economic and financial work for us as a company. You know, like we for 38 years would not get a salary from our theater company. All the money that we made was given to the theater company to produce our work. You understand? Now I get a salary just because I have to create a succession plan, and my successor is not going to work for free. I know that. So I have to put that money in the budget. But knowing that, my theater company doesn't have enough budget to pay me, the money that I need to survive. So I have to figure out how I make my living and how I support, meaning that was part of it. So we allow all our members in our theater company are very successful film actors and television actors. That's how they made their money, so they can sustain the company. I was a professor for 28 years at UCLA. And if you work at UCLA, you can only have one job because it's a federal job. You can only have one salary. You cannot work at UCLA and work somewhere else with a salary. So that's fine. That's my job. I make my money, but I work with the Latino Theater Company as my company, as part of my research for the university. We create, man. We know how to create our own world because we know that at the end of the day, our real work is our creation with the community. That's the real work. And how do we navigate? I mean, it's harsh. It's really difficult. But we have to exist. And not we, what we do has to exist.
Mhm.
Because our community deserve that. And we are the only ones, and our peers and our people that have mind like that, we are the ones who understand our responsibility to our community. And
Lauren, I know you're about to say something, but I want to highlight something that with your question, Devin, that I know Jose Luis already knows because I've actually watched Jose Luis in action. There was a moment recently, 5 years ago, that I remember we were in front of, we were doing the NLTI, the National Latinx Theater Initiative, right? That was modeled after the Black Seed. And Jose Luis said, there are things that we are finding out that we've never known. Like we never knew about appropriations till way later because we were never invited to the table. So then all of a sudden we're learning a system that no one ever said to us, this is actually what you should do. You know, you should actually go here or go there, or talk to this person. Or we didn't, there were moments where, and it wasn't until Jose Luis said that, and I was in a room full of veterans, right, that the veteran said, that's right, I actually learned that process only 5 years ago, and I've been in theater since the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
So there are, and the fact that like 2020 opened up doors for BIPOC theaters that we were never invited to. And then all of a sudden, everybody felt really bad and remembered that we all did theater and that we have done it for as long as we've done it. And then they said, oh, we noticed you weren't here when we were talking to the senators. Our bad, come on in and talk to the senators. And all of the other predominant, you know, all the larger theaters have been there for a century. So there's catching up to do. And Jose Luis will tell people, you know, we're babies in this, in considering the large American theater canon. We're the young ones. So there are things that, there's knowledge that has not been shared on how to survive this system. And is it done on purpose? We don't know. We just know it hasn't been done. And I'm not going to get stuck on that. You know what I mean? So I just wanted it, right? I don't care. I don't care if it's on purpose or not on purpose at this point. Open the door, open the window. We can survive. We're creative and we will win. That's just how I feel about it. So shared leadership, collective mindset, right? Shared power is what we've been practicing when and around each other. So when you see that disconnect, the larger theaters have not been practicing that. So now it's like, how do we move in there? So I just wanted to add that little layer there, because it was knowledge that I'll never forget that Jose Luis said in a room full of funders. It was like, we're new. Don't yell at us. You all didn't even ask us till way later. You know?
And if I can, going kind of nonprofit structure and talking about that is, I'm actually thinking about one of my SHE mentors and colleagues, Linda Paris Bailey, who, you know, artistic director of Carpetbag Theater for many years and started Paris Bailey Arts now. And I was, you know, having getting really fed up with running a nonprofit and just being really frustrated that we weren't able to get individual donations. And she just said to me, like, we've always tried and we can never really rely on individual donations. We have to do something else. And I think as long as success is defined by seasoned subscribers and butts in seats and numbers of individual donors, that's always going to keep BIPOC theaters out, because we have to come up with new ways of raising funds. So I haven't found the answer yet, but I do know that with our communities, especially Asian and Pacific Islander communities, immigrant communities, they're not going to buy season tickets. I don't even have a season anymore. Like it's season tickets is just not part of the reality. But, you know, our communities give at weddings, they give at funerals, they give at graduation, they give at birthdays. So how do we kind of make that a more familiar process? And then also working with communities that have never been to the theater. They're not going to value a live theater ticket, but they'll come, and if we have a raffle, they're going to throw $20 down, or they're going to buy a t-shirt. And as much as we hate that reality, it's kind of accepting the fact that, okay, this is the reality, and our individual donor structure is going to have to resemble something different. Like for me, at least our organization, a gala is not going to cut it. It's got to be something more family friendly, more participatory, more like a party, more like a backyard party. You know, we're still trying to find different ways of doing it. But when it comes to like the struggle with having a looking like we're a real nonprofit, if these are some of those benchmarks that we're supposed to like show that we're legit, that's always going to be a struggle. And so we're trying to find other ways. We still have to, you know, get those donations. We still need to fundraise, but how do we do it in a way that doesn't completely cost us and also is reflective of who we are as an organization?
You know, I come to this conversation with kind of a mixed bag. So I remember, and you know, when I founded No Dream Deferred, I wanted to go the nonprofit route because in school you learn that is the only way actually to do theater. And you don't really learn about other forms of structures. And I remember for the initial few months really burning out trying to plug in. I remember I was invited to this group of funders from Silicon Valley were coming into town and they wanted to meet with different nonprofit groups. And then all the groups were lined up and it was mostly all these Black women in New Orleans that were leading these organizations. And they were telling about their mission and their work. And I'm standing in this circle and I'm watching everyone in its different sectors. And as they go to each Black woman, they tell the story, but at some point they start crying. And I'm like, oh shit, are we gonna have to cry? And I'm just watching it get to me. I'm like, I'm not gonna be able to cry. I'm not gonna get any money. You got to cry. And I was like, so it gets to me, and I'm like, hey, this is what we're doing. And then, of course, our arts education work was really focused on recapturing this understanding that you don't have to be a child to continue to have arts education, which is, as you know, a nonprofit, don't nobody want to fund art education for adults. They only want to talk to children. But so it was just, I was just doing all the wrong things. And I was so exhausted. I had spent all this time with this group. And at the end of the day, I think I got this very small kind of like, you know, when they give you something to leave them alone kind of support. And I remember just feeling depleted and feeling dishonored in the way that I had to show up in space. And I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine. I'm going to shout out Daniela Capistrano, who's a digital storyteller and strategist. And she said, Lauren, your company is founded on this idea of equity and this idea of not just, you know, what is done, but how it's done and agency. And there's a lot of organizations and businesses across multiple sectors who could benefit from this way of making and this way of being. And she was like, they should be paying you to tell them how to do this. And I said, oh, what you think? And so I just started putting it out there and we formed this program called Equity and Justice for Institutional Change. And only to this day, only with word of mouth, not responding to any RFP, we were able to grow from $0 budget to, by the time we got to 2023, we had an $800,000 budget. And I was able to pay myself. We were getting more grants. We still have fiscal sponsorship, but we didn't become a 501c3, and we still are not. No Dream Deferred is not. The Andre Caillou Center is, but No Dream Deferred is not. And I found that in the ways that I show up in my Black womanness and all of the historical context, it is way easier for me to engage from the standpoint of transactional. I have a thing that I do well. This is how much it costs. Do you want it or not? And they say, yes, we want it, and they buy it. Then all of the other negotiations and the ways in which I was made to show up from a nonprofit point of view. And so I was able to circumvent the whole nonprofit mess in that situation. Now cut to now, child. And I'm like, the nonprofit is the ghetto. I don't know how y'all been doing this. This is horrible. It's horrible. Oh my gosh. I'm like, what? So, you know, I'm still trying to figure out ways to infuse. The way that I circumvent all of it is I try to figure out ways that enterprise can still be incorporated into what it is we're doing, because it has to be. You know, one of the things that's going on with the NEA, I feel it. I know the toll that it has across the landscape, not just with people who get federal funding, but to be honest and real, we have never, and a lot of, you know, Black theater organizations have never necessarily been able to depend on federal funding. So this is devastating, but it ain't like the end all be all, because we know, like, oh, that's great. I'm finding out people that were being heavily supported. I'm like, y'all used to get how much from the NEA? Oh my God, that's amazing. You know, so there's always kind of been this connection to what are the other plug-in points. And, you know, I do come from a theater tradition that is very much like individual donations. You know, if I can figure out how this is culturally anchored, if I can find out how our storytelling serves another shared vision for community, if I can connect this story with what the Black social workers of New Orleans have been trying to do in community, then there's a partnership there, and there are funding resources that open up for me, because we're working collectively, right? So I feel like that is how the collective understanding of what it means continues to circumvent all of the nonprofit mess, but continues to work to expand our funding options. So then, and it also does the double duty of ensuring that the stories we're telling are connected to where we are, and they're things that people care about, because I've got to figure out who needs this story to be told the most in my community, and how could they work with me to make sure that people who need to hear it are there, and or the resources there to do it. You know, we have been talking about community co-design as No Dream Deferred since we began, and funders were not trying to hear it. That wasn't cool. You know, like they had other words that they were into. And I remember around 2020, we get a call from, you know, from a major uh, foundation, and they're like, we're into this thing you're talking about now, co-design. They're like, but tell us more, and please don't feel like you have to say anything to match what we want. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, I wish I had the time to make up imaginary stuff to please you. You know what I mean? Like, I wish I had that kind of time. This is the work we do. And because we had support already embedded in how we were working, I was able to enter that conversation. Um, like, if you have something that you want to give to us, that's great, right? So I was able to enter it from a different posture and have a conversation about the work in a different way. Then instead of being like this, you know what I mean? I was able to be like, run us our coins. You say you want to do this. This is what we do. Either you're going to do it or not. Either you're who you say you are or you're not. And so that's a different sense of power and agency. But I'm still stepping my way through. I look at it kind of being like tricky, like I'm a trickster, like I'm going to figure out a way to work in the culturally relevant ways that I know we work. And then, yeah, we've got the ED, we've got the this, we've got the that, whatever you need, whatever structure you need, we got it. But we know how we operate and work when it comes down to our day to day. Everybody's saying shared leadership. The foundations are saying this is something we want. But at the end of the day, they want to know who's the one person we can blame when things go wrong, and who's the one person that we can give all the credit to. And that's really all they care about. That's really all they care about.
That is, yes. Oh, there have been some gems dropped today, y'all, because I think what we are really all trying to say is that the idea of shared leadership is something that our bodies have been practicing since ancestral history, right? And capturing it in ways that you can commodify it, or that you can use it as capitalism, is something that doesn't sit well with our bodies. We have to play the game, but in reality, it's like, we don't do this for that, right? Somebody brought up decolonial, right? Decolonizing, which is the root of the praxis that Urban Theater Company practices. And Leilani, to bring back your point too about the next generation. The next generation, I look at several things, right? Because it's very nuanced. How far are they from their origin story of getting to this country? And how have they been socialized? What have they been around? What have they been exposed to? What structures have they been taught? Right? Then I also look at how they protect themselves. So those are the three things I think of when I'm looking at the next generation. And I try to think about, how do I teach this? How do I get them to remember that they know this, that they've seen this, that they don't have to conform, that there's a way to stand within their power and still say, I deserve to be paid the same amount as that particular artistic director at that theater company who makes $750,000 a year, right? And only has associate artistic directors around them that they're solely responsible for. I deserve to make that amount because I show up, right? And if we want to use terms that people really like that are back from the 1980s, we understand now what our contributions are to the economic development of American theater. We've always known, but we've been separated from it, right? It's been withheld. And now, as we are in the generation or in our tenure as BITOC theaters, right, which are, Black, Indigenous, people of color theaters, we're now learning to say, you know what? We deserve that amount of money and we don't feel bad.
Mhm.
So where is it? And if you want me to learn the language, I will, and I'll do all of the jargon. But the difference between me and the other person is that I actually live it. I live and breathe it. I have no other choice. The NEA is something as well that I've thought about. I have distributed the NEA information to all of my community in Chicago. And guess what? We weren't getting that money. We weren't. So people are like, thanks for the information. And I was like, oh, you either? Oh, us either. We applied. Even when the racial reckoning happening, heck, I was on a panel. I think Jose Luis was on the panel, right? The 2020 of the NEA, and our theaters were still not getting that money. So it's like, or it was a little bit. It was like, here you go. Ooh, you wanted 50,000? Yikes! Nope. Here's 10. Have fun. So it's like, great. 10 doesn't do that much. So the ideas that we're bringing up here and that we're talking about, which is what the entire series is about, is that we have been in cultural practice for centuries. And we just never named it what they're naming it at this moment. And we also have never been or have had the credit of doing that. And this is what we really wanted to do, was to give ourselves the credit, because we deserve it in this particular space within an academic journal tied to an American theater organization, to say, hey, we've been here, we've done it, we're going to continue to do it. Talk to your friends who have money and give us money. We are at 1:21 and here in PT time. So I always have to forget how to do it backwards. So we're at 9 minutes from our time of being over. And I just wanted to see if anybody had any last minute thoughts, but I want to ask a very specific question. As we are where we are, because the reality of it is that we are not the new generation, none of us on this call. We're not the next generation. So how is it that, or what were the words of wisdom that we would pass on? What are 3 things that you would say in order for the next generation to remember that this is something that is a part of them?
I want the next generation to really understand their commitment to the community. I want them to understand the difference between theater and entertainment. It's really important. They have no conscience about that, And I want them to know that the journey of really being an artist with the community is one of the most enjoyable things that can happen to any human being. My life is full of joy because I found purpose in everything that I wanted to do. I want them to know that, because sometimes they don't.
I think something that I'm always saying to myself and trying to tell other young theater practitioners is ask yourself how you define success, because it's not, I mean, Broadway, getting on film and television, those are how the general public defines success. But I'm always having to remind myself that why I keep doing this work isn't because I'm seeking those goals. It's because when I have someone in the audience who's seeing their own story being performed on stage for the first time, and they come to me afterwards in tears talking about what that means to them, to me, that's success. And I'm constantly having to remind myself in this capitalist society that we're taught to define on how much money you're making and, how many awards you've got. And honestly, the kind of work I do, I'm never going to get that. And it's not what I seek on my day to day. I seek on my day to day to provide transformation in our theater practice. And I know that happens in our plays and in our productions. So just always asking yourself how you define your own success isn't going to be something that your parents are even going to understand. You have to really recognize that for yourself. Yeah.
Ooh, so good. I feel like this is advice for now, for those of now and the next gen. I would say that I always tell folks that to realize that for artists of color, communities of culture, we are the plug. We're the blueprint, right? And to act as such, that we have everything we need and we actually are the blueprint. They can look to, like, the industry looks to us to figure out what's the next new thing. And then I think just the differentiation between working collectively as practice and working as a collective as a politic, which is a broader understanding of what it means to be the collective we. And to remember that throughout your career, as you navigate within spaces of color and outside of spaces of color, to always have your own tree somewhere. America, the history, we move in cycles. So this crumpling of our institutions and not being able to rely on them as sources of stable sources of resource, this is nothing new. This happens every so often. It's always going to happen. You cannot wait until you need your community to build kinship. You have to be building kinship all the while. You always have to have some trickster energy a part of you. When you're in that PWI, how are you diverting resource and support outside of that space to spaces of color so that it's there for you when you will inevitably need it? And so I always say, make sure that while you are building their spaces and you are making it beautiful and nice and so diverse by your presence and the audiences you can pull in, that you're also building that for yourself and for the collective we at the same time.
No.
Yeah, I had to let that sit. If I could, I'd let it sit for another 3 minutes. I just want to take the time to thank you all so much. And I also want to lift up Devin, who's the person who came to me and said, we have to do this. And I was like, but I'm so busy. And she was like, but we have to do it. And I was like, okay.
This conversation has been amazing. I'm going to send it far and wide. It should be required listening for so many in the field, and so many of the essays in the series the same. So Miranda, you helped make it way beyond what I originally envisioned. So thank you all so much. And thank you, particular Miranda.
Thank you, Jose Luis, Lauren, Leilani. I can't wait for us to be in space together again as we build our collectives. And I really pray that this is the beginning of I'm not religious, but I really pray that this is the beginning of us having more conversations and getting our communities to remind themselves that we are a we.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
so much.
everybody.
Y'all.